Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to a very impromptu webinar, but an opportunity to have a conversation that have been wondering about and gotten a little bit of little glimpses of information over the past few weeks. But today is Saturday, April the 25th, 2020, and I am gathered here in this virtual webinar space with some friends and colleagues. And so what we're going to do is just kind of pass the microphone as we go around. And if you happen to be attending live, we think that you should have the opportunity to, hey, my dad is in the room. Hey, Dad. We think that you should be able to post a question if you want to. We don't have a chat room, but there should be an interface where you can ask a question, and I'll fiddle with that a little bit just in case that is not happening right now. But our first question is just, sort of what your current role and situation is with remote learning. Actually, did I get those out of order? No, I didn't. Just kind of introduce yourself. And so I'll go first, and then I'm gonna hand the mic to Delilah, and then Delilah can pass on to Rhonda, and then Telannia. I'm gonna say
You got it.
because I've been calling her T for a few years. So my name is Wes Fryer, and I am the Technology Integration and Innovation Specialist at our school, Casady, in Oklahoma City. And I also am teaching this year, which I'm so excited to get back to the classroom, 5th and 6th grade computers, which means media literacy and digital literacy. And so I am teaching kids with our new schedule. I'm teaching 4 out of every 6 days live. And then I'm also supporting our teachers. So that means doing some, one-on-one support, doing some live, webinar workshop stuff that we're inviting folks to, and we're doing a lot of stuff with Google Classroom and Seesaw. So Delilah, how about you? You want to introduce and tell us kind of what your situation is right now?
Sure. I'm Delilah Rodriguez, and I multiple roles just like you, Wes. I teach computer science at McAlester High School, and we don't have a technology integrationist or specialist. So as the STEM coordinator and the tech person, that's kind of just fallen on my shoulders over the last 5 or 6 weeks, however many I kind of quit counting at some point. But right now, I post different lessons online with Google Classroom, and a lot of training with teachers over the last 5 weeks or so. Question and answer sessions, short little tutorials with our teachers. That's kind of what I've been up to, working with our district administrators of what it needs to look like now and again maybe later in the future.
That's right. All right. Rhonda, how about you?
I am Rhonda Schroeder, and I am a principal in Oklahoma City Public Schools. Remote learning has taken on quite a different look for us in a large, somewhat urban district. And so my particular role really is more about support and resources for the staff at the school that I work with. Primarily in a support role for them. Most of them are doing both what the district has asked us to do and then some individualized things that they've chosen to do. So really, I'm just kind of behind the scenes, letting teachers work and be creative and innovative. And when the need arises, I'm available to help with navigation of digital tools or, this for that and things more or less what the need arises. It's kind of eclectic right now.
Fantastic. And Telannia, how about you?
So I'm Telannia Norfar. I, like Rhonda, I work in Oklahoma City Public Schools. I'm a math teacher. This particular year, I am Algebra 2 and AP Calculus teacher at Northwest Classen High School. I have to definitely say I'm a knight through and through. And I'm also the math department chair. I am senior sponsor for the last time ever. And yeah, this is a hard time to be a senior sponsor. And I'm also the outgoing Oklahoma Council of Teachers Mathematics president. So remote learning has a lot of different facets for me. As a teacher, like Rhonda was saying, I'm really glad our district has really been thoughtful about the requirements for our distance learning plan for to help meet the needs of our families and our staff equally, but at the same time giving us the ability to innovate. So like we have a minimum of a 1 hour office hour where we're live availability with students, but at the same time we have lessons we can prepare. They have packets they can pick up at meal sites along with 2 meals a day when they go pick up the packet. As a senior sponsor, I'm even after this going to meet students to pick up their cap and gown so they can have some memories of senior year. I'm also going to be meeting with a district for a little bit with Oklahoma Council of Teachers Mathematics, where we're trying to help. What does math look like at this time? Later. And in my spare time, I help people with project-based learning. I don't feel like I have spare time too much right now, but I try to help out with that too. Like, what does that look like remotely now? So.
And you recently got a book published and have been, having that heavily promoted by lots of folks in addition to you. And that's a project-based learning book, correct?
Always, see, yeah, thank you. I forget about that part, and then thankfully friends like you always like, yeah, T, girl, you got a book that came out in April. Like you need to talk about that.
Well, I want this to be a free-flowing conversation where we can just ask each other questions too. So, before we kind of jump in, we've got 6 questions that we put in here, but we don't have to necessarily just stick with those. I want to ask a follow-up, and if anybody else wants to jump in with a follow-up question, just as far as background, Delilah, how has your role at McAlester, not only just evolved in the last few weeks as remote learning's become a reality? How has your district been, moving with regard to STEM and educational technology and Google and all that? Because I know you've been involved with ed camps, and you've started ed camp McAlester, right? This is a fantastic thing that's still going on. Can you talk a little bit about how that's been changing and evolved?
Oh, absolutely. So I think Wes, was it 6 years ago, 7 years ago that we first met, and we were just bringing STEM to McAlester Public Schools, and we came to a training camp with Wes, and we were just starting it in elementary level at that point. And it took a few years for me to build it up at all the elementary sites in McAlester. And then we've moved it on to our intermediate center. We have it now in all of our schools across the district. We last year passed a bond for 2 STEM labs at our intermediate center, which is 5th and 6th grade, and our middle school, which is 7th and 8th grade. And just in the last 2 years, really, we've added aeronautics to our high school. We've added robotics. We've added computer science, Java, Python. There's been a lot of STEM and computer science being added in, especially at the high school and middle school level.
Wow.
And yes, we've had about 4 years now, and always amazed at who comes back and who comes, because we're kind of nestled in southeastern Oklahoma, where there's not we're the biggest city in this area, and people come from all over.
Yeah.
Southeastern Oklahoma.
Absolutely. And so Rhonda, you were for, was it 5 years? How many years were you at Arthur?
Oh, not 8 or 9.
Okay.
2011. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your time at Arthur and how significant your participation as an Apple school and our only Oklahoma school, iPad 1-to-1 Apple school, just a little bit of that background, because your middle school shift has happened this last year, but your role has evolved and changed in the last, recently as well, not just with remote learning.
Yeah, right. Well, so, part of the, when I reflect on Arthur Elementary and the things that were, I don't even know the word to use, tried, attempted, we had as successes, we had some failures at the same time.
Piloted and innovated. I mean, lots of pioneering work, I would say.
Oh yeah. You really had to be really okay in your own skin about taking some risks, knowing that some may succeed and some may fail. I think probably a large part of the challenge was moving past the perception from most that accountability is about test scores. And most times that is. And if I had to choose one message that we really had to pull the line on was that we're doing more with teaching and learning than we are focused on that, end of the line almighty test score. While we couldn't, necessarily ignore it, obviously, there was a lot of work around how do you frame what we're trying to do so that teachers have an opportunity to be creative and innovative, and students have an opportunity, not only creating an innovative environment, but for students, but for educators as well, and being able to, move that through quite a long-term project, so to speak. When you're looking at a 3 to 5 year commitment, you have to kind of figure out the balance between keeping just enough pressure to keep people in the boat, but having enough let go to really let people explore and kind of move at a different pace. So, how it really has impacted, I think, as a community, where we are now is that, we have a little more readiness, I think. That it wasn't, we kind of got thrown into this technological scenario, and a lot of the experiences that we've had over the last 4 or 5 years, that we've just kind of said, oh, well, we can figure this out. This is, we know how to do this. The end of that, though, is that we've been able to kind of reach out and support other teachers and other schools on what does this look like, and especially in elementary when you've got 6 or 8 grade bands to work with. How does this look in preschool compared to how it looks for 3rd or 4th graders? And so I would say it definitely kind of prepared us for being very flexible and nimble in a time of uncertainty, and just being able to take some risks that otherwise you may not be quite prepared to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Telannia, I'll throw the same question to you. How has your role changed? And obviously, the senior part as far as sponsor is kind of coming to an end. Are you finding yourself shifting even more into the project-based roles? How has your role, shifted and changed in the past few years, even before remote learning?
Oh my God. That's probably part of my problem is I shift way too much instead of kind of well, I should say all of my shifting is always based on loving kids. And even the senior sponsor role was, kids coming up to me at the beginning of the year and was like, we don't know who our senior sponsor is. And I was like, oh shoot, y'all need somebody. And so that's sort of how that happened. And then I was like, oh, this is not my jam. But I would say my biggest shift now, especially this sort of time has enlightened me on some needs, is to truly try to help the entire world of mathematics that I can get to hear me that we really need to make more shifts. We are not friendly to the masses. We make math completely too complicated than what it really is. And we are really messing up the M in STEM for what it could be. And so as I've sort of processed me, although I'm going to be the past president-elect of OCTM, I'll still be sort of involved with really getting that membership up so that we can connect with more teachers, especially at the elementary level. We have a great membership base for secondary, middle and school, and math, high school teachers, but not a great base in elementary. And I would love to reach out to them. I'm working on 2 new books for project-based learning at the K through 5 level to help promote that. And just really, truly, this time, the remote learning has helped me to see how much we haven't gotten out of advances that we supposedly have made at a policy level or even at different school levels, how much we're not there. Like, I know I was curious when you were saying about, to Delilah, sort of what's her journey. I've heard a lot of how the rural parts of Oklahoma are really damaged when it comes to tech and your internet access and your broadband. And I was like, it's 2020. Like, how do you
That's right.
how are you not having great internet access in 2020? Like
That's a good question. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
okay. So let's
Yeah, and you know, Wes,
go ahead. Go ahead, Rhonda.
I was just going to piggyback a little bit on what you all were saying. What has been really interesting right now is the amount of, I don't want to say impromptu, what I'm looking for, many agencies and organizations really reaching out, trying to figure out how do we support teachers and how do we support schools. And even, you know, most recently conversations with our both UCO and OU, really looking at surveys and assessments on not only teacher perceptions, but administrative perceptions. How are we, the support from the district, from the state. And so I really think that aside from learning going on with students, there's some seminal work going on here with how do we support schools and teachers, both locally and at the national level, when we're all kind of pushed into this same universe of remote and, you know, digital connecting in some ways. So I've been impressed with how our state has moved even in such a short time when there's been not a lot of other choices but to really move with.
And we've used the term, you know, don't squander a good crisis. I mean, to an extent, we're just in survival mode, and we have been, and we got to use what we know and what we're comfortable with. And if we don't have a tool to do what we need to do, we got to find a tool. But you know, as this becomes, as we define what a new normal is, you know, I think we've got to say, hey, and this is one of our questions that I think is coming up, number 3, like, hey, what do we observe that we're going to need to change? And it might not just be with technology, you know, it might also just kind of be about instruction and about learning. Delilah, can you just share real quick, and then we'll go on into the next question. What does internet access look like, not only in McAlester proper, but you know, in the areas surrounding, and what does that look like for you all in terms of providers and speeds and your kids? Because I think I remember you saying there's a fairly significant number that don't have high speed at home.
We, that's actually on one of the questions later on. That's one of the challenges that we faced. In McAlester itself, we have a really good internet connectivity. There's high speed, but I mean, you could just go 5 miles out of town and maybe have nothing, not even satellite internet. So it just kind of depends on where you live in our area. If you're inside the city limits, you're pretty good, you know, and we've got it available at school sites and things like that, but not very far out, which a lot of our students live outside the school district or in, you know, in the country around the town. You don't have anything. I mean, you're lucky maybe if your phone works good, if you have data on your phone to be able to work from your house.
Right. Okay, well, let's go on to question number 2. And so question number 2, we've already kind of touched on a little bit, but what is your technology situation like? Not just connectivity, but in terms of, you know, student devices. And by the way, I'm not wanting to assume here that this is all digital. I know there's a lot of things going on in terms of packets, in terms of non-technological, but we are, I think, in most cases, really, you know, utilizing what we've got in terms of whether teachers have laptops, students have some kind of devices. We sent in January, so I'll answer this question. We have been an optional BYOD, you know, if you want to bring a laptop at the high school, you could bring one. But we've been all cart-based and still lab-based. However, you know, we've got somewhere over 200 iPads that are not only in teacher hands, but they're on carts that our librarians check out. And we've got, you know, sets of 4 iPads in a lot of our elementary classrooms. We've been working on trying to do that in all of them. We've got Chromebook carts. You know, we've got I think we have 7 carts in our middle school where we've got about 230 kids. And so and then in January, we sent a team of 10 from our middle school, and that's where I'm teaching, although I'm helping everybody, you know, potentially I can assist anyone who needs help, but I'm teaching in the middle school. We sent 10 teachers to Dallas in January thinking that, hey, in a year and a half, maybe we'll go 1-to-1. And so what just happened in 3 weeks is the whole school went one-to-one with BYOD. And so our situation is we asked families to provide a digital device. So that could be a laptop, that could be Windows or Mac, that could be Chromebook, it could be an iPad. I have kids on 5 different devices. I have one of my 5th graders who's on an Android tablet, and he's been doing well. Thankfully, the web has matured so much in terms of capabilities, but I can't assume that everybody has a Chrome browser, for instance, because we got kids on a lot of stuff. But our teachers all have MacBook Airs, and we've been on Google for I think over 10 years now, and we've been using Seesaw, and we've paid for the Seesaw for Schools I think for 3 years now. And so all of our teachers in pre-K through 4th grade all have a homeroom Seesaw. Although in this remote learning, our 4th grade team decided to just go ahead and go with Google Classroom primarily. And so Google Classroom is utilized by a lot of our teachers, but we also have a student information system. It's called Blackbaud, and a lot of independent schools have that. That's where all of our grades are. That's where all of our schedules are. That's where all the parents log in. And so it's a bit fractured. We're not using a Canvas or a Desire to Learn or something like that or Schoology, which there's schools doing that. But thankfully, we've been using some different tools. We did a survey at the beginning to say, hey, where kind of are we with all this? And one of the statistics that was pretty significant was that at the beginning of remote learning, 1/3 of our teachers were not using a digital platform to exchange files with students. Meaning, they may have been posting pictures and things like that on Seesaw, but they weren't asking kids to send anything in. So there's a lot of reasons to be thankful with our situation, but we've checked out a lot of Chromebooks. I don't have the numbers, but it's like at least 40 or 50, iPads and Chromebooks that we've checked out. We have about 900 students, a little over 900. So anyway, that's a little bit about where we're at with devices for kids and students. Delilah, where are you all with? Because you all went one-to-one in the middle school this year, didn't you? Or was that last year?
We got the bond in the fall, and we were in the process of handing out, like the freshmen, we started with freshmen, were handed out Chromebooks in February, but out of around 200, I think we only had around maybe 80 to 100 that showed up to get them. So like our principal had a whole bunch in her office just sitting there. So our teachers they're kind of a mix. Most of our teachers have MacBook Airs. And then a couple of years ago, the high school teachers, they took our MacBook Airs and gave us Dell laptops. And so at least every teacher has a mobile device that is issued from the district that they can take and use. So that is very helpful. I know there's districts just outside of McAlester that have desktops, so for their teachers. And that definitely presents an issue with this remote learning if you can't go to the school building and work. But our students, we are not, as far as if they're in class, we would be one-to-one. We have enough to be one-to-one almost across the district. But kind of like we were saying, Wes, there's carts, there's iPad carts, there's Chromebook carts, there's laptop carts, and they're just in the different classrooms. So they weren't really assigned to any particular student. That was something we were looking at for next school year, was we were going to have all those devices from the bond money, that we were going to be one-to-one 5th grade and up. But we just weren't there yet. We didn't have all the devices in. Our tech department is kind of small. They couldn't handle getting all those. We have a little over 3,000 students in McAlester. So, if you just think about it, average is probably a little over 1,000 Chromebooks, and they couldn't get those ready in time to have them out by when this happened.
Absolutely. Yeah. This stuff takes time, and being ready for learning at school is very different than being ready to hand stuff to students. So I know both Rhonda and Telannia are in Oklahoma City Public Schools. What does this look like for you, Rhonda, and your teachers? Maybe some of it might be unique to you all, because I know the district, everybody has a laptop, but what does it look like for you and your teachers right now, and students?
Yeah, so you're right. We both kind of have different experiences. Northwest Classen may be very different situation than Southeast Middle School. We may have some commonalities, but from a perspective of being in such a large district, there are some things that are common to all teachers, which is all teachers do have a laptop. So that's the minimum. And so now the age and the functionality might be in question for some, but the assumption is that you have a working laptop and that you can at least be productive from that standpoint. As it pertains specifically to Southeast Middle School, we're in a very unique and blessed situation in that as a new school, we had some fairly ambitious goals for year one that actually kind of set us up to be in a good place as far as technology is concerned. If you're in the school building now that we're all at home, it might look a little different for students, but what we do know is the situation that we're in at Southeast. We have roughly 700 students, and uh, our numbers based on our surveys and research tell us that about 75 to 80% of our kids do have access to the internet at home and do have a device at home. And so that's an encouraging place to be as far as, availability for students and families. At the school level, we have enough devices to be one-to-one for the current population, and that was one of our year one goals, was to get ourselves situated to where we had enough devices. What it looks like for us, in contrast to what it was at Arthur, at Arthur Elementary, each student had an iPad assigned to them as a student, and so that iPad went with them everywhere, and they were responsible for that one device. But at Southeast right now, we really are doing more of a shared model. And it's really driven by what the classroom teacher wants to use in his or her classroom. And so you may decide you want a card of Chromebooks, or you may want a card of iPads. And so whatever you as a teacher right now, it's strategic. What you as a teacher are comfortable using and likely to use in your classroom is what we want you to use with your students. And, the benefit to that where students is concerned is that, you may have Mr. Fryer for math and you may have Ms. Rodriguez for English. And in a given time, you're working on multiple devices and learning different platforms. And so there's an inherent benefit to that. And then, of course, our teachers have an iPad as well. And so there's multiple agnostic approaches to how we're handling technology at Southeast Middle School. And so right now we're just still, piecing things together, but our goal was to make sure from an access standpoint and an availability that we have enough technology resources for our students.
Awesome. Well answered. Telannia, what's your situation at Northeast?
Yeah, so as Rhonda was saying, it is the district level sort of has a teacher goal set, but they allow each school to sort of decide what it looks like inside of the building as far as devices and platforms and things like that. And so at Northwest, and probably like many schools, it is a mutual decision of the teachers who are there. So for instance, we have Chromebooks, we have iPads, we have smart boards, document cameras, but it varies based upon sometimes the department or the academy. So also at Northwest Classen, we have a Academy of Health Science and a Teacher Prep Academy. And so CTE is also sort of a part of those academies, which is different funding, which means they have different things too. So I would say, though, most of our departments, with the exception of electives, have two to up. Well, actually, no. I think everybody has at least 4 Chromebook cards to share within that department. Each department has an iPad card that they can assign to one particular teacher, and then most rooms have a smart board. Now, how old it might be is a whole nother story. And our CTE sort of rooms, they have the newest interactive TV types of boards, so they don't have the smart boards. Recently with the district allowing teachers to pick between MacBook or a PC, when they do their upgrades. So there's different teachers with different things now with that in our building. But primarily everyone has a Dell. We haven't been renewed yet. For most of the people in the building, as Rhonda was alluding to, you have to go through a cycle, and once your computer sort of ages out, then you get to get a new one.
And
So
no iPads personally for teachers yet. Is that correct?
no iPads personally for teachers unless they just use it. So like we have well, you have to request, but we do have BYOD now in the district. But your school has to request to sort of go through a process to get it. And so Northwest did that right before everything happened. So so a lot of teachers are using their personal like iPads or personal devices when they come to school now. I know I use my phone regularly in my classroom just because it's just more compact and easy to handle. Oh, this is not a platform, but definitely one situation we purchased that's kind of outside of the norm was Nearpod. So we're considered one of the interesting things about Oklahoma City Public Schools is there are certain schools that are structured for certain pieces, and so we're the newcomer center for the northwest part of part of the city. And so what that means is if you just got to the United States from another country and you're at the high school level, then you're driven to Northwest Classen, even if you're not necessarily in our boundary. So we have a very high ELL population, and the ELL department at the district level purchased Nearpod licenses for all schools that were their newcomer center. And then we also have very high special needs, special education services. So we have a deaf program, autistic program, severe disabled program in our building. And so they have a lot more iPads in those arenas just because that device is very supportive for accessibility. So yeah, so it's very, very unique. And then you many times see people just with pencil and paper and whiteboards.
Right.
Which we forget that's a technology too, but
Right.
It is. It's all technology. What about your kids and have you all, as far as survey wise, in terms of access of some kind of device, and what does that look like?
Rhonda made me realize that I forgot to follow up and see what were our final numbers. So we had a unique situation. I feel like it was a unique situation from sometimes other districts. There was a whole state requirement of having to find out what your kids have, and many districts just sent out an email. But we actually called our families and found out personally. And I thought that was really, at first, you sort of like call, but I mean, we need to call our kids. So it was like a really actually great way for us to connect, find out information, but connect. And so we have like 1,300 kids in our building, and we got a hold in just 2 days, we got a hold of almost 900 kids.
Wow.
And I mean, we keep calling, and we've updated the survey even since then. But that was amazing.
It was like the great OKC call-a-thon.
Yeah, it was so cool. I mean, at first you're sort of like, what? But then at the same time you're sort of like, oh my God, yay! We're gonna
Phone and
talk to our
technology,
kids.
you can call people. And then generally we got a way to do that. There's all kinds of fancier ways, but
Yeah, and it was before we launched distance learning, so it was a great way to check up on people and find out what's happening and actually really inform them. Because another thing we realize is people don't really do email; they don't know what that looks like or what's happening. So, calling. But I was pleased to know that many of my kids had internet at home and a device, and it was due to sometimes already some partnerships that had happened with Cox Communications, a big internet provider here in Oklahoma City area, where they were for our 9th grade whole team. They could have gotten a hotspot all year, no questions asked, to use in their home, and many of them did that. So that was really pleasing to know that kids had taken advantage of that before this happened.
yes.
Although there's things happening now to get them there, but that's still, you got to wait to get it installed. So the fact that they had that, unfortunately though, many of them don't have a current device, like their computer could be really old. But I'm intrigued to know what was our actual numbers finally.
Yeah. Well, I know we surveyed as well. and I think one of the things we learned is it's just so important not to make assumptions, because we had a handful of faculty that didn't have high-speed internet at home, and so some of them are tethering, and we've had at least two that I know of that have gone up to school that are close enough or whatever, and they've been kind of by themselves, in their building, but that's been with the situation that we have in terms of restrictions and whatnot, that has been an option. But yeah, I think, boy, there's been a lot of data collected, and I don't know what you want to call it. Postmortem may be a little bit of a macabre way to say this, but sort of like once we're through this pandemic and whatever, I mean, I don't know, and we probably can't wait. Who knows how long that's going to be waiting? So we've got a lot of data, and hopefully that could be actionable data, as far as being able to figure out how to connect students, how to connect families, how to connect teachers as well. Well, let's do question 3, and this one, I think T, you put this one in. So actually, I'll throw this one to you first. What are we discovering that should be, could be, might be changed about school as a result of this situation? And I'll toss that one to you first. We can get
Yeah.
first order.
Tell what happened. Why I am in my core nature like this civil rights advocate all the time. It's just born out of me from family. My family was very active in different civil rights pieces. My aunt's drive-in was often the place that Clara Luper would organize. So I just, and I can't not vote, just so many different things. And so I'm always sort of looking at where we're at when it comes to equity and issues, and where could we be. And of course, this pandemic has definitely shone a light on how much we are inequitable in the United States. The number of deaths of people of color compared to non-people of color is ridiculous, and it's not because we're getting it more than other people. It's the access to healthcare and other places. But it made me also think of school and how many practices we hold, not because it's ever really been right for kids, but just because it's easy, or just because it's the way we've always done it. Or it's because especially at the secondary level, I really love my subject, and I'm just holding dear to to mathematics or science or English, or fill in a blank with the subject you teach. And so it's just made me realize, like the first thing that hit me was we have 1,400 kids in our building, and we were trying to figure out, well, how do we contact them? Well, they have 7 different teachers based upon the way a high school is structured. You have 7 different classes or 6 different classes. That's but and so 7 different people calling somebody is a little crazy. That's a lot of calling. But at the same time, you want to connect. And we didn't have really any sort of like core system. We ended up doing it by first hour. Like everybody called their first hour, and we reach out that way. But then we have people at Metro Tech who don't have like, it was just sort of this craziness that was unveiled of, well, why do we have 7 hours? Like kids don't really function well with that. That's 7 different bosses. I mean, can you imagine if each of us had 7 different principals we reported to, or 7 different superintendents we reported to? Like, that's insane. So why do we do that to kids all the time? So it started me on this sort of whirlwind, and thankfully, people love me at Northwest enough to where they're riding this dream with me a little bit. Like, they do realize we can't blow up the system completely, but they're letting letting some of my ideas and theirs, we're melding it together to sort of rethink how we come back. And some of the starting points is we're thinking of this idea of order of the round table, because of nights, and how we'll have every kid connected to an adult. We don't want to call it advisory. Advisory has never really worked well, but it's much more of a growth and opportunity for you to grow with your kids. So I would keep like my students until they graduate, and connect with them. And hopefully we can get to the point where I'm thinking where it's a group of teachers who completely make the schedule each day. No bails no more. And we flex with them the whole 4 years. We don't leave them, and we rotate back down and go on up. You see, that's why Rhonda wants me to come work with her. We love each other way too much.
That's
So
fantastic.
yeah,
That's,
so it
that's like
seems
looping. You're going to loop with your kids then through 4 years.
yeah. Well, I mean, when we really think about things, learning is about relationships. If you do not have a relationship with your students, they're not gonna learn from you. I love Rita Pearson's TED Talk. She's like, kids don't learn from people they don't like. Like it's just, and they don't come to school just because of a subject. Like they came to school for a girlfriend, or they came to school for friendships, or they came to school because of an. Like it's relationships. We're in the relationship business, and so to me, our policies, our procedures, everything should be reflected around relationships. Then.
Amen, sister. You need to just, let's get you, you got a microphone now, and you just need to get as many as you can and keep preaching that sermon.
I will have anybody come hear me if they want to
come. All right, Rhonda, what about you? What do you think we're discovering that might or should be changed about school?
Oh my gosh, I could talk as long as she can and say the same things. I think we're obligated. We have no choice but to work within the systems that we're in. But if we could undo some of those systems in a way that is human friendly, we've taken an old school model of one size fits all for the sake of managing the mass of students, when what we know about learning is it's a very social process. There is place for independent learning, and there is place for it not to be as social, but as what we learned that in Education 101 as social beings. Social learning is the core of what we learn in education, and so we've built in systems that are really designed more for troop management than it is for learning, and so if I could outschool things, I would do probably a lot of things different, and to include, let's take a perspective of STEM. If you're in a STEM school like the one we're trying to build, then you're highly focused on science, technology, engineering, and math. Whereas in a school that's not quite STEM yet, science and technology is still taking a back seat. When really what we have learned out of this experience, you watch the news for any amount of time at all, it's the makers out there that are making PPE, and it's the makers out there who are trying to come up with alternative problem-solving solutions. We're not filling in bubbles and figuring out strategies for reading a paragraph to figure out how to solve this pandemic that we're in. And so I think we have this real world situation that we're all looking at and seeing how it's unfolding, and everyone's taking a piece of that they can contribute to. And I think we would do quite a benefit to our students and to our staff if we found a way to make schools look a little more lifelike to what they're going to actually experience in real life. Now, how do we do it? I don't know. I'd write a book like Norfar does there and tell you all how to do it. But
you should, and we'll promote it and buy it when you do.
I think the idea is having that concept that things do need to change, and this is the time to be looking at how those things are going to look in the future. So, yeah.
All right, Delilah, your turn. What are you discovering or thinking about in terms of change for school in McAlester? Oh, Delilah may have had an audio glitch. I'm seeing her microphone has gone off. So I will.
There we go. I'm here now.
You're back. Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the things that I've learned that was a huge thing, and I'm sure it's this way in other schools too, is technology's always been about just the technology classes instead of school district wide. They've left all the tech teaching to the computer teachers or the CAD teachers, the ones that had computers in their rooms, and the teachers that didn't teach that necessarily weren't necessarily using technology. And one of the huge things when I think about this question is we have to plan for more than what's just the normal of what we've had in the past as normal of being in class with our students every day and being able to talk to them every day. And when that's ripped away, how are we going to have a relationship if we haven't been using another form besides person-to-person contact. And that was a huge thing for me as a high school teacher. Is I was in elementary before, and parents were involved a lot in elementary, and they came to parent-teacher conferences, they came to family nights. High school is a very different, it's like a whole nother country or something. I mean, it's not anything like elementary.
It's a different culture.
Because I've lived in both. And I will say, through this process, I have been more connected with my parents of my high schoolers than I ever have been when I had them in class. And that is huge to me. That why wasn't I doing that to begin with? Why wasn't I texting them? You know, why didn't I find out about Google Voice before now? And why wasn't I doing Google Meet when they didn't show up to parent-teacher conferences? Why didn't I get them online with me like we're doing now? I never thought about it. I just didn't do it. And so I really think that communication and relationship with the family and the student has to be built, whether we're in class every day or whether we're, at our house every day. And so that's been a huge thing for me that needs to change, is that communication back and forth.
That aha reminds me of Easter Sunday, and we set this up. So my parents live up in Manhattan, Kansas, and then my sister and her family are in the Kansas City area in Liberty, and then our son is out in Colorado. He's finishing school. He graduates in 2 weeks, I think. And anyway, we just set up a Zoom call for 6 o'clock and said, hey, everyone have your food ready, and we're just gonna have Easter dinner together. And so that's not a school context, but it is a communication context. It was awesome. It was wonderful. And I said, why have we never done this before?
Yes.
We all have these tools and we know about this, but I mean, it was just so nice to just hear what was going on with folks and go back and forth. One of the things that I really had an aha about yesterday, we have a parent who works at UCO and teaches in the mass communications department, and she has kids that are, I think, 4th grade and kindergarten maybe. And so anyway, she's an expert at the university in terms of moving course content online, and how do you interact, and how do you share content, and how do you chunk it, and what are the things you got to keep in mind as far as how kids learn and read and process and these kind of things, and relationships, and how do you build community. There's all these different things. So anyway, she recorded a series of 4 videos, and I'll put some show notes. If people watch this later on YouTube, I'll put some show notes at the end, and I think I'll probably post this on my blog as well, so you can find these things, and you can connect to us as well on Twitter. We're all 4 on Twitter. We had 2 conversations, Wednesday this week and yesterday, where our teachers just kind of gathered in a go-to meeting, and where I just asked our questions. The thing that I was most excited about was our pre-K and kindergarten teachers, talking about how their kids might work with some of our older kids, maybe to write a book together. We've had there's a class of creative writing for seniors that's been going on for like 7 years where that happens. But then we also were talking about our graduates, and hey, maybe they could connect, to kids, and that wouldn't just be one class, and maybe they could share like how they're using math, how they're using reading and writing, how did they get where they are, what do they love about their job, but they were things that were outside the box, because it's challenging to because of our schedules, and just like T was saying, with whether you got 7 classes, however many classes you got a day, rotations, all those things. So I think that's one of the things that I'm energized about, is how can we find some ways to make connections and to help kids, to what Rhonda was saying, connect to some authentic skills and some authentic work, and that if it's not bounded by the same kind of constraints that we've had in the past. And so I'm excited about where those conversations are going to go. All right, well, let's go to question 4, success stories. And I'll share a quick thought, and then we'll go in our same order again. So Delilah, I'll go back to you next. I think one success story has just been our teachers really stepping up to embrace some new tools, or some tools that they've used a little bit, but maybe not as extensively. And certainly Seesaw, especially for our pre-K through 3rd grade teachers, just lots of learning and lots of stepping out. I mean, every teacher in pre-K through fourth grade for sure, and at upper levels too. I mean, everybody's doing stuff with video. We were doing all asynchronous for a while with our youngest students, elementary and lower, and now there's live office hours, but you know, not everybody's comfortable in front of the camera. Not everybody wants to record themselves. Not everybody's sure how to wasn't sure how to make a recording and then share it, and we've learned about Google Drive, and, we've got a few teachers using YouTube, but mostly, sharing things through Google Drive. So I think some of the success stories there have been just teachers stepping out of their comfort zone, and then doing what kids need, and that's to make connections and to be able to see them. Even with some teachers who initially didn't want to turn on their webcam when they were doing a live class, as far as I know. I mean, I know some that now are, and they're doing it because kids, that's what they need. We need to connect. So Delilah, what have you seen as far as success stories for where you are?
Well, it kind of piggybacks on what you were talking about. Our superintendent has a really big vision for being one-to-one, and he started that 4 years ago, and he came up with a plan of a little bit at each year's moment. You were to add a few more things to your tool chest of what you were to be doing, like posting one assignment on Google Classroom and then using it more. Well, we had a lot that, kind of like you were talking about, I don't want to do it. I've always done it this other way, and then we have remote learning, and they don't have and to see those teachers go from anti-technology to how can I do this? How can I do that? And just those teachers that were very reluctant going, okay, well, what about this? Have you tried this? How can we use this? And just to see them, like, I even wrote this down, comfort zones, kind of like what you're talking about. It's amazing to me to see what they're doing when they thought they couldn't, just like with our students. Mm-hmm. And to know what we can do now that they are using that. One thing we didn't have across the district was consistency with platforms. We didn't have, I mean, we were supposed to be using Google Classroom, but not very many people were. And we didn't have anything for our littles. So bringing in Seesaw and Google Classroom across the district with certain levels really helps our students, our teachers be able to work with each other and learn through this process. And just seeing how many of them have helped each other and stepped up and been leaders as well in this time, it's amazing. It's just amazing to see what all we can do. And one of the issues we had was students not having devices at home. Connectivity was one thing, but we did have some that had internet, but they didn't have a device. And seeing how we could go from not having devices for kids to being able to check them out in like a week and a half's time was huge for us, between our technology department and our administration, to just be able to get that out and get those scheduled out to the students. And I've had multiple of my own kids that I teach who now are able to do things they weren't able to do 2 weeks ago, just because of the initiative of people just going outside, thinking outside the box. How are we going to this cart of Chromebooks? How can we divide that up and get that out to students at home?
Awesome. Rhonda?
Well, I've been thinking as she was talking about where would I start success stories. I mean, I think from a perspective of, while there are certainly some pockets of challenges, I think the overall consensus could be is that we as a state and as districts together have moved, and even our private schools as well, have moved heaven and earth to change the face of education in a matter of days and weeks, as opposed to the many years that it's taken for many things to happen. And so I think it goes to show that as a community of educators, we are resilient. We can be responsive when we need to be. And when you combine the need with creativity, amazing things can happen that you didn't know you could do. Whether it's planning out your response to equity or balance or work-life balance if you're working from home with kids under your own feet. And so I think all the challenges is that we have faced, the success story comes both at an individual level and at a state level of how we've on. So surely there will be successes and challenges across the board, but I think we would be really doing an injustice to ourselves if we didn't count this whole experience as a success story for what we can do when we need.
Well said. Delilah?
Yeah, I'm so glad I went last because now I thought of three really great ones, but in different lights. So I would say the first one is something that and I don't know if Rhonda was shocked about this too, but I think I want to say a success story of my district. I think Oklahoma City Public Schools, like Tulsa Public Schools, like sometimes people have a negative thought about our district because of the largeness, but we've had like running out of learning packets being picked up at our sites. And I mean I would say that I didn't expect a lot of people to be able to get out and get the learning packets or be too consumed with other things, but like I mean we're not running out anymore, but like the first couple of times we ran out of packets. That's absolutely amazing to me. And then the last time I had looked, like in one day we fed 37,000 families breakfast and lunch. Now
Wow.
I often laugh and I'm like, I don't think all those people was in our district, but but
Hey,
it doesn't matter. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, it doesn't matter. We were serving our community, and I think that's just so amazing. And the partnerships we're getting to help us keep feeding kids 2 meals a day is such a great thing. And then the last two stories come from inside of like my school. So one is like I mentioned, we have a newcomers department, and it's just a unique structure in that the kids spend their first year in a ELL class to develop their language skills, and then they go out into a sheltered environment, meaning that they go to teachers who were trained extensively, and also have a bilingual assistant to help with the language development. They're almost like a cohort for at least 2 years, and then they're out in the regular community for the rest of the time. But one of our ELL teachers, he is, I mean, most of his classes is meeting him online twice a week to have a formal lesson with him. He had every last one of his kids get accepted into what's called Project Voice, which is a personal narrative story of newcomer students, and all of his kids got accepted, their stories, and it's going to be published. And so that's really cool. And then the last success story is my own personal one. I really was nervous about trying to do project-based learning from a distance with kids who don't really have to come do this, and how do I connect with them and also try and get all the senior stuff done. And each week I'm growing with the number of kids who are interacting, and they're answering me, and I was like, is this too much? Is this okay? Because this they already had told me a long time ago I use tech in a way they ain't never used tech. And so so we're still sort of I did get a little too ambitious on the first one, was having to make movies, but the rest has been pretty like easy, and they're banking it. Like my Nearpod numbers, I'm excited to check it this weekend to see who all was able to join. Now, unfortunately, nobody still won't come see me live. Like I keep trying to tell them, I was like, would you just come say hi? Just get on your phone and call me.
I think that's a universal. It's office hours, and I think they have a parent like force them to come or something usually to although so yeah.
Yeah, but they'll answer me by text, so I'm taking it. I was like, if I text them, they're answering right back. But yeah. So.
That's good. That's good. Well, we are getting just right up to the top of the hour, but we may just go just a couple minutes because this is we've already done question 6, which was challenges. We've thrown some of that in, so we don't need to go there. This is just the last question. As we look to the future, all right, we're going to have a new normal. We don't know exactly if we're returning in August, if we're going to get to go back for a while. We don't know if there's going to be a surge. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. But what are the things that you all are thinking we could do to help teachers, to help schools? We've already mentioned some things in terms of, connectivity and bandwidth. I want to keep inviting and celebrating, teacher growth and professional growth, because boy, everybody's in a different situation with regard to their family, who they're living with, what they're dealing with. Is somebody sick? All the anxiety, like we're all over the place with that. But, you know, we've talked about at our school, working on continuing to build a culture that's very invitational and that's very celebratory, because everybody's at a different place, and it can be just a huge thing to have recorded your first video and have put that out there, but to be encouraged on your journey and then to be stretched. I mean, that's something that we're working on doing, and I'm definitely thankful to have a role at our school to get to do that. I think I'd love to see that happen more broadly, because I know we're all connected, you know, via Twitter and other ways, and it's a big part of how we learn. And so anyway, we'll go kind of same order. Delilah, what are you thinking moving forward in terms of teacher support in schools?
Well, I think just continued, kind of like you and I had talked about yesterday, actually, making sure they understand how to get the information to their students and how to interact with their students and how to collect the information back from their students and the continued growth. But also, I think one thing that I look back over the last few weeks that we haven't done, that I feel that in the future, if we continue this remote learning, is the mental health of our teachers and students. I mean, a lot of training on tech and how to get the instruction out, but even as we've talked in this webinar, relationships, that's important, in that if they don't care about you, if you don't care about the student, they don't know that, they're not going to listen. And that's the same thing as that mental health. We can't forget that that's a huge piece. And then seeing you every day with that relationship is good for their mental health. So how do we, if they're not going to show up to meetings, you know, and we can't see them face to face, what can we do to make sure that they are getting that help that they need? And that goes as teachers as well. I like to see my teacher friends, and being at home in a room it's just not the same. And so I think going forward, we definitely have to make sure that's a piece of the puzzle, that we talk about mental health and how to self-care, I guess, is more not just mental health, but just self-care for yourself, and how to keep that relationship going. Because the thought of having to start in August with new students that I don't know this way would be a lot different than going for the end of the school year when I've known the students, and most of my students I've had for 2 years. So they looped with me for computer science 1 to computer science 2. That would be a challenge to start the school year off with a whole group of people that I have no idea who they are, what they like.
Absolutely. Rhonda?
Yeah, I was kind of reflecting on what she was saying, and even the differences between having really age developmental practices in place. A good example would be, you know, in higher ed, it's not uncommon to start a school year off online, because that's whole online programs and degree programs, and it's a very different world. And so if you have a background in online learning platforms and you've kind of been in that drive a little bit, your mindset isn't really thinking so much about what this difference would be. But when you are really living in public ed, private ed, K-12 settings where everybody has a different developmental need and a different experience, I think the beginning of the year could be very similar to the end of the year, where we take inventory of what we have, what our challenges are, and then we create new visions and new ideas for how we start the school year. Maybe I'm a little skeptical, I suppose is the way to say it, but I certainly hope we're back in school in August. I can't imagine a world where we're out of our realm of public education or even education to K-12 for 6 months or longer. And I think that has long-term impacts that I don't think that we can even project right now. And so, especially on social emotional learning for kids and social emotional teaching for teachers, I think more so than solutions of learning is we need to be ready for the long-term impact that will actually take years to process and identify what the impact has been. So.
Telannia?
Ooh, I was hoping with listening to everybody, I would have something really amazing to say. But it's like, this is so hard. I ditto everything that has been said. I think the one thing that I am processing with this is we, we are definitely realizing how little time it takes to get things done. And I think one of the things we can do in our preparations for teachers in schools when it comes to this being out part is better condensing. Like 3 hours max is all you really need to understand multiple things at once. And so how can we rethink consolidating, especially at the secondary level, where we're so separated and we're so tied to our one area? How can we meld areas together so that kids could not? I don't know if you guys even seen the video. It's a video that's kind of been circulating on Facebook of a student just breaking down. He was like, I don't think y'all get all of what is happening and all of this work that I have to do. Is like I'm never not doing the schoolwork. Even after I'm online with someone, I'm still after. And he said it was crushing me. And so I was so glad he was brave enough to do that, because I think that's one of the things we need to think about when we return is how can we as our district is constantly saying, be kind, compassionate, and graceful with kids.
Those are good terms to keep in mind. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank each of you for spending some time here on a Saturday morning to jump on a webinar. I love being able to hear the perspectives for each of you. I also just love the fact that, like, we didn't have to do any ads and we didn't have to tell somebody, hey, we had to stop. We get to have a conversation like we want. And there are several ways that I want to encourage everybody. If you're not already reaching out, Okla Ed is a hashtag which no one owns. There's a group that runs the Sunday night Twitter chats that happen at 8 o'clock each evening. But there's, really, really powerful connections to be made. We've had a really strong Ed Camp movement here in Oklahoma that continues. We did, fortunately, get to have that Ed Camp at the last of February before all this happened. I've counted my blessings that wasn't scheduled for after spring break or whatever. But we just want to encourage people to reach out and to connect. Like I said, whether you're seeing this on YouTube or on my blog or somewhere else, there's going to be links to connect with each of us, to connect with Telannia, with Rhonda, with Delilah, and myself. And I think that, we're just going to want to continue to have conversations like this and to challenge ourselves and to challenge our schools and our communities. How can we make it better? Because we've been in a survival mode, and this is becoming a new normal. And so we've got to figure out not only how to survive, but how to thrive. And the good news is our collaboration tools are better than they ever have been before. And so we want to extend that invitation. Any other closing thoughts any of you ladies have? I think you've done a great job. All right. Well,
Awesome.
We'll go ahead and sign off. I heard somebody. Go ahead. Rhonda, go ahead if you want.
No, I'm good.
Good. All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time. The tornado siren went off, 8 minutes ago, so we're 8 minutes late. But if you stayed this long, thanks. We'll sign off.
Live in Oklahoma.
And
Most definitely.
how do I click stop? See, this is why